You've done everything they told you to do. You track the calories, you walk the steps, you say no to the dessert night after night. And yet the weight, especially right here around your middle, it doesn't just stay, it grows. You look at yourself in the mirror and the first thing you think is, I must be doing something wrong. I've lost my discipline. My willpower is gone. Look, I'll be honest with you. In 30 years of practice, I have seen this exact story play out in my office thousands of times. And I'm here to tell you, you are not failing. You were never told the truth about what was happening to your body. It has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower. The silence ends in this room. It's not an accident that you weren't told. The average doctor, even most OB/GYNs, gets less than an hour of menopause training in medical school. They give you the only tool they have. Eat less, move more. But that tool becomes obsolete the moment your physiology starts to change. Here's the number nobody mentioned. Your main estrogen, estradiol, which managed your metabolism for decades, has dropped by over 95% from its peak. A 95% drop. And that single change ignites a metabolic fire inside your body that makes the old rules of weight loss not just ineffective, but actively work against you. What we're going to talk about today is why the exact same healthy meal you ate at 40 now causes weight gain at 55. And the answer isn't in a diet book. It's in your hormones. This silence wasn't an accident. It was inherited. Think about your mother's generation. They called it the change, if they spoke of it at all. It was a private misery, endured with a kind of quiet resignation. They had no language for the anxiety, the sleepless nights, the way their bodies began to feel like foreign territory. They just assumed it was the price of aging, a burden to be carried alone. So the only advice they could pass down to you were the rules that worked in their 30s. Watch what you eat, stay active. They had no idea that those rules would one day expire, leaving you with their silence, but also a whole new layer of guilt, because unlike them, you were supposed to have all the answers. You had the internet, the wellness industry, the calorie tracking apps, and still nothing worked. Then a door slammed shut on an entire generation. In 2002, a major study called the Women's Health Initiative released some initial data that created a worldwide panic around hormone therapy. It was everywhere. The headlines were terrifying. And the result was that doctors overnight stopped prescribing. An entire field of medicine that was just beginning to understand the menopausal transition was abandoned out of fear. Research funding dried up. Medical schools quietly erased menopause from their curriculums, deciding it was too risky, too complex. So for the next 20 years, an entire generation of women, your generation, was left to navigate one of the most significant hormonal shifts of their lives completely on their own, armed with nothing but the myth of willpower and the advice to power through it. And that is why you ended up in your doctor's office, describing this profound, unshakable fatigue and the weight that seemed to appear out of thin air. And you were handed a pamphlet on diet and exercise. It isn't that your doctor is a bad person. It's that the system that trained them failed you both. They were never given the tools to understand that the problem wasn't your discipline. it was your biology. They couldn't tell you that without estrogen, your body's response to stress changes completely. That a hormone called cortisol, your primary stress hormone, was now getting stuck in the on position and forming a dangerous partnership with your insulin. We're going to unravel that partnership piece by piece, because that's where the real story of this weight gain is hidden. So you have this vacuum, this silence, and into that void stepped a $400 billion industry that was more than happy to sell you a solution. The wellness world, the diet plans, the apps that chirp with approval when you log 1,000 calories. They sold you a game you could no longer win, and then they charged you for another round every time you lost. Look, their entire business model is built on a simple equation that ignores your biology. It requires you to believe that if you just try a little harder, buy the next plan, or drink the expensive green powder, you'll finally crack the code. But the code was changed without you knowing. And the truth is, some of those healthy habits, the punishing workouts, the severe calorie restriction, they actually make the problem worse by flooding your body with stress hormones. They are pouring gasoline on your metabolic fire. And on the other side, there's the clinical reality. A study I often come back to found that nearly 3/4 of women who seek help for their menopause symptoms are left completely untreated. 75%. Let that sink in. Millions of women walking into a doctor's office knowing something is profoundly wrong and walking out with nothing but a pat on the back and a suggestion to try yoga. It's a systemic abandonment, and the cost of this isn't just a few pounds of belly fat. The cost is the silent rise in risk for heart disease, which is the #1 killer of women. It's the slide towards diabetes. It's the cognitive fog that makes you feel like you're losing your mind. This isn't about looking good in a bathing suit. This is about the next 30 years of your life. And it all comes back to that partnership I mentioned, the one between cortisol and insulin. Now, let's finally talk about what they're doing to you. Let me tell you about that partnership. It starts with cortisol. You know it as the stress hormone, but in midlife, its job description changes. Without estrogen to keep it in check, cortisol gets loud. It stops turning off. So your body is getting a signal 24/7 that you are in a state of low-grade emergency. A body in an emergency doesn't burn fat for fuel. It hoards it. It hoards every last calorie because it thinks a famine is coming. And cortisol directs that fat storage with laser precision to one place, your belly. This is visceral fat, the dangerous kind that wraps around your organs. At the same time, your cells are becoming numb to insulin. We now know insulin sensitivity can drop by up to half in the years around menopause. So you have a stress hormone screaming, "Store fat," and a fat storage hormone, insulin, with nowhere else to put the energy. They become a team, and they are working against you. But they don't just store fat. They change how your brain works, too. I went through this myself. I was 52, a doctor who was supposed to have all the answers. And I still remember the exact morning, standing at my own kitchen sink, when this wave of heat and dizzying anxiety washed over me that was so intense I had to grip the counter to stay upright. For a moment, I thought I was having a heart attack. It wasn't just a hot flash. It was a feeling of complete and utter dysregulation, as if a dozen iPhones were on vibrate inside my chest. My body felt like a stranger's. What I didn't understand then, what they never taught us, is that there are estrogen receptors in over 400 different tissues in your body. 400. They are in your heart, your blood vessels, your bones, your bladder, and your brain. And when they go dark, it's not a gentle dimming, it's a power outage. And that power outage has consequences far beyond weight gain. It affects your very sense of self. And that's the part that truly scares women, the part that makes them think they're losing their minds. It's the brain fog. The word that's on the tip of your tongue but just vanishes. The sudden, unprovoked anxiety that feels like it comes from nowhere. That's not a character flaw, that's chemistry. Without estrogen, and with your natural calming hormone, progesterone, now at nearly zero, the entire symphony of your brain's neurotransmitters, your serotonin, your dopamine, is thrown into chaos. It can look and feel exactly like a clinical depression or an anxiety disorder, and it is misdiagnosed all the time. Your energy, your mood, your cognitive clarity, they were all being quietly supported by hormones that are now gone. It's not just estrogen either. Your testosterone has also dropped, the hormone of drive and mental focus, and it's almost never even tested in women. These things aren't happening to you, they are happening in you. And it's all part of a single, predictable physiological story that you were never supposed to hear. Now, let me explain what is actually happening in your body. Okay, let's be very clear about what is actually happening in your body. It begins the moment your ovaries retire and stop producing the estrogen that ran the show for 30 years. Your cells, which used to be exquisitely sensitive to the hormone insulin, start to go a little bit deaf. We now know that in the years right around your final period, your insulin sensitivity can drop by up to half. So that healthy apple you ate at 40, the one your body used for clean energy, now at 55, causes a flood of insulin to be released because your cells just aren't listening. And when insulin is high, your body is in one mode and one mode only: fat storage. It's a biological switch, and it's a switch nobody ever told you was coming. That's only half the story, because while your insulin is getting louder, your primary stress hormone, cortisol, is getting stuck. Without estrogen to buffer it, any stress, a tough day at work, a poor night's sleep, or even a too intense workout, now sends your cortisol levels soaring, and they stay high. Your body is living in a constant low-grade state of emergency. A body in an emergency does not burn fat, it hoards energy. And cortisol is a brilliant logistics manager. It directs upwards of 60% of that newly stored fat from a high insulin meal straight to your abdomen as visceral fat. This is why you can be losing weight from your face and your arms, but your belly isn't budging. It's not just fat, it's a stress signal made visible. I had a patient last month, a lovely woman, I'll call her Susan. She sat right there in that chair, and her eyes were just filled with this quiet desperation. She told me, her voice almost a whisper, "I feel like I'm eating air and gaining weight. I get into bed exhausted, but my mind just races. It feels like my own body is fighting me." I looked at her and I explained the partnership. I told her about the cortisol keeping her on high alert, and the insulin storing every spare gram of sugar as fat around her middle. I explained that her natural calming hormone, progesterone, was now gone, which is why her brain wouldn't shut off at night. And I watched her face as the story unfolded. The tension in her shoulders just released. For the first time, she saw it wasn't a flaw in her character. It was a predictable chemical cascade. And this cascade has effects far beyond your waistline. The same hormonal shift that triggers insulin resistance is also what accelerates bone loss. Let me give you a number. 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 will break a bone because of osteoporosis. That's not a typo. 1 in 2. For decades, estrogen was the guardian of your skeleton, helping your bones absorb calcium and stay strong. Without it, your bone density can drop by as much as 20% in the first 5 to 7 years after menopause. So, while you are dutifully counting out almonds and punishing yourself on the treadmill to lose a few pounds, a silent fragility is setting in that has nothing to do with your weight and everything to do with the hormones you've lost. The stakes here are so much higher than a number on a scale. So this is the turning point. This is the moment the old advice becomes not just useless, but destructive. A 1,600-calorie diet that would have helped you lose weight easily at 40 will now, at 55, likely cause a frustrating plateau or even weight gain. Because every time you severely restrict your food, you are sending another stress signal to your body. You are telling your already elevated cortisol to scream even louder. Famine is here. Shut down the metabolism. Hoard everything. You are not failing the diet. The diet is failing your new physiology. Your willpower was never the variable that changed. Your body's entire operating system did. This is the part that makes women feel like they're going insane. It's the moment you've been eating nothing but salads and grilled chicken for 3 weeks straight. You've been dragging yourself to the gym even when you're exhausted, and you step on the scale and the number has not moved. Or, God forbid, it's gone up. And that is the moment your brain screams at you, failure. But what if that feeling of exhaustion, that stubborn weight, that mental fog you're fighting, what if it's actually a direct result of the very things you're doing to fix it? Because you're sending stress signals to a body that can no longer handle them. That is not aging. That is a hormone shift nobody explained to you. It's a biological trap. And the anger you might feel right now, that quiet, burning feeling that you have been blaming yourself for something that was designed to happen this way, that anger is justified. And that's when you start to think it must be you. You withdraw. You start to believe the exhaustion is a personality flaw, that the brain fog is just you getting old, that you've lost your edge. You feel this profound sense of disconnection from the person you used to be. I am here to tell you, from the other side of that desk, and from the other side of 50 myself, you are not crazy, and you are not alone. There are millions of women right now standing in front of their own mirrors having this exact same conversation with themselves, blaming themselves for a truth they were never given. Someone, somewhere, in a curriculum committee meeting or a research funding board, made a decision that this conversation wasn't worth having with you. that your quality of life wasn't a clinical priority. The problem was never your body, it was the silence. So what happens if you just keep pushing through? If you accept this as your new normal and keep blaming yourself when the strategies that used to work keep failing you? In the immediate future, the next 1 to 3 years, the exhaustion you feel right now doesn't just stay, it deepens. The sleep you manage to get is stolen by night sweats, leaving you drenched and freezing in a cycle that can repeat 3 or 4 times a night. That isn't just an inconvenience, it's a form of chronic sleep deprivation that chips away at your memory, your mood, and your patience. That brain fog starts to affect your confidence at work and at home. The low libido and irritability you can't seem to control start to build a quiet wall between you and the person you love. And with every month that passes, that voice in your head saying, "It must be me," just gets a little louder. Now, let's look out 3 to 10 years. This is the critical window where the consequences of that silence start to become irreversible. The bone density loss we talked about is now accelerating. You don't feel it, of course, but your skeleton is quietly becoming more fragile day by day. The natural cardiovascular protection you got from estrogen is now gone, and your risk for heart disease is silently climbing to match that of a man your age. And the vaginal dryness and urinary symptoms that nobody wants to talk about, what we now call the genito-urinary syndrome of menopause, it doesn't just stay, it progresses. It becomes a source of chronic pain that can make intimacy, or even just sitting for a long time, a daily battle. The cognitive slips start to form a pattern that isn't just worrying you anymore. Your family is starting to notice too. And then we look at the next 10 to 30 years, the decades of life that you worked so hard for. The consequences of that untreated hormonal shift are now fully mature. That risk of breaking a bone from osteoporosis has arrived. It is now 1 in 2. Your risk of developing dementia is significantly higher than it would have been if the neuroprotective effects of the hormones you lost had been addressed. And cardiovascular disease, which felt like a distant concern in your 40s, has now become the single greatest threat to your life. It is the #1 killer of women. And you risk looking back and realizing you spent years feeling tired, anxious, and disconnected from your own body, all because you were living inside a silence that was always, always optional. But you don't have to wait 10 or 20 years to feel the cost. The psychological toll is happening right now. We know that rates of anxiety can affect up to 70% of women during this transition. We know that the risk for a new diagnosis of depression doubles in the years around your final period. That isn't a coincidence. It's the direct chemical result of losing your brain's natural mood-stabilizing and calming hormones. It's the shame that comes from believing this is a personal failure, and the profound isolation of looking at your friends and colleagues, seeing them all pretend they're perfectly fine, and so you pretend too. Tell me in the comments below, and I do read them, which of these consequences that we've talked about is the one that you are living right now, the one that nobody ever warned you was coming. This suffering has a cost. It isn't abstract. It's measured in lost promotions, in relationships that frayed under the strain, in years of joy that were muted by a fog of fatigue and anxiety you thought you were supposed to just endure. For years, you have been carrying the weight of a systemic failure and calling it your own. And I am here to tell you, it is not. This is not personal failure. This is inherited silence with a measurable physical cost. So now you see, the goal was never to count yourself into submission. It was never about the calories. It was always about the insulin. And the quiet anger you might be feeling right now, knowing that you have spent years blaming your character for a problem of chemistry, that anger is justified. But it is also where the work begins. You are not failing. You were simply never told the truth about what was happening to you. This is the part where you stop fighting your body and you start understanding its new language. This isn't about a new diet, a miracle supplement, or another punishing workout plan. It is a fundamental shift in perspective. You now understand a physiological truth that millions of women are still blaming themselves for every single day. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. This knowledge changes the questions you ask. It moves you from a passive consumer of wellness products to an active advocate for your own clinical health. Instead of asking what diet to try next, you can now walk into a doctor's office, the right kind of doctor, one who is trained in this, and you can ask, "Let's talk about my metabolic health, not just my weight. What is my fasting insulin? What are my triglycerides?" This is hard. The silence was designed to make it hard, but you are no longer a woman with a body that is failing her. You are a woman who finally has the language for what is happening inside her. And that changes the entire conversation. It moves you from being a passenger in your own health journey to the driver's seat. And that is where the real power has been hiding all along. Your body isn't betraying you. It has been forced to play by a new set of rules that you were never taught. And now you have them. This knowledge is not a cure, it's a map. It shows you where the silence has been living inside your own home, inside your own skin. It's the first step out of the fog, but it's not the last. So many women are still walking through that fog alone. Share your story in the comments below. I read every one. Tell me, what was the one thing you needed to hear today that you finally heard? And you have to ask yourself now, honestly, how many more days of your one life are you willing to give to the belief that this was your fault? The silence ends in this room, with this conversation, with you. Understanding the role of insulin is the first piece of the puzzle. It's the why. The next step is the how. We have to talk about what actually goes on your plate to manage this new chemistry. So, in the next one, we're going to do just that. We're going to build, piece by piece, the meal that helps you start working with your body again, not against it. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.